I'm Will Harris. I'm the Deputy Director at Join. Truly honored to be here with all of you today. This is a collective, collaborative learning day. Recognize that there are landlords in the room and service providers in the room and funders in the room, and a wealth of experience from a lot of places. And today we'd just like to share with you our experience, bred from 24 years of providing direct service to people who are struggling and experiencing homelessness on the street. Some of the things that we've learned, create a collective and collaborative environment here today, and that's why we called it Join Shares. So, in particular, we'll be sharing our outreach work, which has been the basis of what we do for a long time, our housing placement work, our post-placement housing stabilization work, and how all of that works to support our model of private sector landlord recruitment. And as we talk about and think about the very difficult rent environments that we're working in right now, feel like there's a lot that we can share here and a lot that we can add to everybody's efforts to help folks that are facing homelessness on the streets of our community. I think the thing I want to start with is that the vital takeaway is it's not just about how well you can present a business case or a case for landlords to be engaged with you at application, but the success of our program, the success of, I think, any landlord recruitment program is tied specifically to how much work you can undertake with new tenants post-placement. And so we want to kick off the session today with some conversation about Join's outreach and retention work. And then we'll have a second workshop after that around how to make that business case with landlords and property managers. So in between, this session will run until 2:45. We'll take a small break. At 3 o'clock, we'll come back and introduce that second session. We'll wrap up those sessions at 5:30, and everybody is invited to stay for a community symposium we're having later this evening with Shannon Singleton, Join's Executive Director, and Dr. Sam Tsemberis, who is here to join us today. And on that note, Sam is here in this workshop today. Very honored to have him here. He's the founder and executive director at Pathways, an agency we ran across. We were just joking about that really affirmed Join's approach around housing first, and he's got a dedicated career to speaking to housing first and its benefits. And in particular, I think it'll be exciting to hear a little bit of his insights about what that means for landlords and property managers in this environment. Something that I hope we can carry through the day as we think about how we work with the private sector landlords and property managers. So before I introduce Quinn Colling, who is our outreach coordinator, and Christina Castano-Hanau and Angie Hernandez to talk about retention, I'd like to have Dr. Tsemberis come up and say a few words to kick us off. So, Dr. Tsemberis.
Thanks, Will. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here supporting the work of Join, because in our collective efforts to help people who are homeless, we need models that demonstrate effectiveness and have the kind of care and compassion that is needed to address this issue. And in many ways, I think that we've gotten stuck in models of housing and support services that haven't reached the scale that we need to address the problem, and we haven't changed government policy in any way that is actually addressing the problem. And it was, after all, the federal government's decision to downsize the investment in the building of public housing, a hybrid model where government and business and faith community invest in the building or rehabilitation of housing and offer it from a nonprofit perspective. And the work of Join and the work of the landlord community here and the support services, you need all three, is a kind of model that can point the way forward at a scale that we need.
I'd like to have Quinn Colling come on up and share Join's approach to outreach, the work we've been doing, why it's important, how it sets the stage for us in our work with landlords and our housing, and then housing stabilization after placement. So Quinn Colling.
Hi everyone, like Will said, my name's Quinn. I've been at Join now for a very long time. This is going to be 13 years in August, and for 10 of those years I was the outreach worker on the west side, working with folks living outside in their cars, wherever they're at in Multnomah County. So before we get started to talking about outreach or retention or any of our models, it's important to kind of ground our work in our core principles. So kind of run through those real quick and then spend a little time talking about how our outreach model works. This is not working. All right, sweet. So, relationship-based. Our workers aim to build an authentic relationship with each participant based on mutual trust, collaboration, and reciprocity. To make this possible, Join minimized the traditional boundaries that typically guide client-staff relationships, allowing workers to determine the appropriate boundaries for each relationship. Participant-centered. Join services are tailored to respond to each participant's specific circumstances and needs. Each participant's action plan and the support that the workers provide along the journey to achieve that plan is determined by the participant's own visions, goals, and priorities. Strength-based. Join views all people as inherently capable and trustworthy, and as the experts in their own lives. Workers help people to identify their own strengths and resilience, and they support them in developing strategies and plans that honor and build on those assets. Non-judgmental. Workers accept each person without judgment and don't penalize participants for behaviors that might result in loss of service eligibility and other approaches. This supports the creation of more honest and transparent relationships because participants don't feel like they need to hide the truth in order to receive services. Equity informed. Join aims to incorporate an understanding of racism, privilege, structural oppression, power imbalances, and other disparities into all of its work in order to provide services that are culturally responsive and tailored to each participant's experience with inequitable structures and systems. Trauma-informed. Join strives to provide a servant's environment that is safe, welcoming, and sensitive to the role that trauma plays in participants' lives. This includes working to understand the conditions underlying people's behaviors and the way that personal trauma and structural oppression may shape their outlooks and decisions. Flexible. Join provides a flexible working environment that allows staff to work organically and respond to people's needs and priorities in real time. Staff are given the autonomy to decide how to allocate their time and resources and what services to provide to each household. And finally, mobile. Our workers are highly mobile, visiting people in their homes, on the streets, in their sleeping in cars, accompanying them to appointments, and connecting them with community services. This reduces the power dynamics inherent in the client-staff relationship and allows workers to be agile in their ability to respond to crisis and immediate needs. So, all of these come up every day in all of our workers' work that they're performing. Our outreach started in around 1997. Leo was our first outreach worker, who many of you know, and is still working at Join today, 22 years later. For a long time, Join had an immersion program that, and we still do to this day, works with high school and college students and bridges two different communities that don't often interact with one another. So they are going out to camps, visiting with folks, staying in our building, sharing a meal, and learning about what life is like for folks who might be living on the street in that moment. And through some of our early community organizing work in the immersion program, Join found that folks wanted a space where they could come and take care of what they needed to do, have a shower, have a locker, store their stuff, and get on with their day. So we started our house program. And in further community organizing work, people said, at the time there are a lot of shelters, you have to run through a lot of steps, a lot of red tape. Housing first is something that we're interested in, although they weren't necessarily using those words. And they were saying, we're ready for a place right now, just give us the key, we'll go with this. And so we hired Leo. And shortly thereafter, we hired Mike in 1998, who still works at Join, and now we have 8 outreach workers and 1 family outreach worker, which we just hired through the Bezos grant that we received. We have the city divided up into geographic areas, and we're connecting with folks, actually countywide. We have 2 East County workers, 2 West Side workers, 2 workers in Southeast, and 2 workers in North and Northeast. What does their work look like? They are out every day visiting folks at their camps. They're in Forest Park. They're underneath bridges. They're connecting with folks who are doubled up in folks' homes. And they're developing relationships with individuals. The primary goal isn't necessarily housing. It's to get to know them. They get to know us. And if housing is a step they would like to take, then we try to make that happen. There are varieties of ways that happens. Many of you here are familiar with those ways. Our funders are here, they know. But typically what we're able to do is connect folks with landlords if they need that connection. We can offer first month's rent deposit. We can offer some short-term rent assistance. We can connect people to long-term vouchers. Often when we're out on the streets and doing outreach with folks, people may not be ready to talk to us in that moment. It may be many years after. Matter of fact, there was a camp I would visit regularly, and on, I think, year 7, I was chatting with this individual, and he said, you know what, Quinn, I think I'm ready to give this a try. That, you've always been talking to me about an apartment. I think I'm ready to try it out. And the next day, we were able to move him inside. Now, as our outreach program has developed, it is one of our oldest programs. We've had to take an equity lens and look at the work that we are doing closely. We know that communities of color are often experiencing homelessness in a variety of ways that don't mean we are running across people at camps in their cars or on the streets. And so we've tried to develop a number of different ways that we can be culturally responsive. One is we have our Housing Off the House program, where Leo, that first outreach worker I mentioned, is connecting with folks that we might not normally connect with and building community and placing people. We also have been partnering with culturally specific agencies and taking referrals and a variety of other things. Running over time. When someone does identify housing as their goal, we are in that moment trying to think how we can connect those individuals to our retention services and bringing the retention worker in to help develop a plan to think about long-term goals and strategies. And we are doing retention work for at least a year after placement. That being said, I would like to introduce our retention coordinator and our MPSH coordinator, Cristina Castaño, and Angie Hernandez, to talk a little bit more about our retention program.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. My name is Cristina Castaño now, proud immigrant. I coordinate the Mobile Permanent Supporting Housing Team, which is a multi-agency program that provides retention services as well. Well, basically, retention started as probably it was the 3rd program created at Join. It was more than 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago at this point, and it started just as a very organic way. When they started, it was just a few outreach workers noticing all of this isolation and folks they were housing and folks that would just stay in house for a few months and then going back to the street. So they realized the need of attention and support they needed. One of these outreach workers started just visiting these folks and hanging out with them and visiting them. They started creating some events. And over time, that's when Join decided to just divide this and create an outreach program separated from the retention program. Now we have reached a point where we also have a multi-agency program, and we provide the same wraparound services with other organizations as well, which is the Mobile Permanent Supporting Team. I've been part of Join since 2013 at this point, so it's been a great journey. Super happy to be here and sharing with you all. So let's start talking about what retention is. Basically, retention means every kind of services that support folks and provide any kind of support just to make sure that they avoid isolation. When we help our folks to tackle isolation, we help them create a stronger network of support. There are different tools we use to make sure that this happens. One of the tools that we have used many times is called eco-maps. When we first house someone through the outreach team, we basically are able to work with them and create a housing plan. We develop with them and engage with them in a way that they can create a plan and a sustainable plan to be able to embrace every single barriers. So eco-maps basically were created by Anne Hartman back in 1975. There are many versions of it at this point, and this is basically one of the things we use. We place our participant in the center as a circle, and we start connecting them with all of the different resources and connections they have. What we try to figure out is their strengths, their relationships, all the community resources that they know or that we can help them find, and some opportunities. Some of these connections might be a little weak, and some others might be really strong. But when we're finally able to create this case plan with them, we recognize the ones that are a little weak, and we start working on plans to make them stronger and better. So basically, a housing plan not only specifies the duration of joints, rent support, but also the steps a household will take in order to be able to assume responsibility when the rent payments end and our subsidy ends. Basically, this is just an idea of how EcoMap will look once we have worked with a household. Obviously, this is just made up. We have the participant in the center. We include every single member of the family there. We make sure that we write down with them all of the connections they have, even if that means culture, religion, recreation, education, income, if that's the case, and whatever else is strong, weak, or not so strong, just to call it that. After we recognize all of these things, we start creating a stabilization process and build support around them. So basically, if you think about these, the EcoMap is basically a roadmap. And the roadmap helps us to achieve independence. That's a point for them. At this point, I'm just going to call Angie Hernandez, who's going to help us talk about our strategies.
Hi, I'm Angie. I'm the retention coordinator at Join, and I'm just going to explain to y'all just a bit about how we do the retention work, some more of the specific details that goes into all of our work. Okay, so once outreach does their part and helps people in the community go into housing, we connect with households, families, and are able to provide some support going into navigating just, I guess, living in an apartment indoors. And one of the first things we do is provide some orientation for them. So what the guidelines are as far as what's in the lease, when to take out the garbage, when to bring it back in. Sorry, I am kind of nervous and I laugh a lot when I'm nervous, so just bear with me. So yeah, so we provide some orientation with that, and we also like to connect them to the landlords so we can have some a relationship established there too. And where is it at? Yeah. And all of our work is based in supportive relationships, which means doing a lot of home visits. So we're really heavily based in that, where we're able to form some trust with households and have some of our core principles play out into that. So a lot of that goes into encouragement, getting to know the people, what encourages them, what motivates them, so it can be participant-centered and they're in the driver's seat pretty much. We also like to do a lot of community events. Where is it on? Yeah, so we do a lot of community events and build connections with them. We like to help them overcome isolation. and find resources in the community which can help them know who to go to, who to call, who to lean on. And here's some of our events that we do. We like to find out what people in the community want and are interested in and what helps them engage into their own community. So we do some of the stuff for Thanksgiving that's open to everyone, but everyone at Join helps out with that. And our back to school events. And I'm so sorry. Yeah, so let's see. Where is it at? Yeah, a lot of the details that go into this are everyday things that might be simple for us, but for someone who hasn't navigated them in a while or don't have any resources or connections, it can be extremely difficult, such as signing up for healthcare, transportation, whether it's bus passes, getting connected to medical transportation. Food insecurity is also a really big thing that is a barrier for some people, whether it's food pantries, food stamps, signing up for being able to provide clothing for families, hygiene. A lot of these things are basically just basic human rights that people have had a hard time accessing. So we're just wanting to make sure that once people are connected with retention, they're able to navigate those resources with us. Benefits such as Social Security, whether it's helping people get an attorney, filling out the applications on their own, housing as well, so just retaining the housing, making sure that we're able to pay rent, that people on the program are not sacrificing some of their basic needs in order to make rent and make ends meet. Utilities is also one of the resources that we help them connect to, paperwork, legal issues. One thing that's also really close to my heart is also immigration issues. We have an attorney that we connect people to and help them navigate just so many things that people can take for granted, just day-to-day things, but helping them connect to that. Meaningful activities, so that's some of our events that we do. And yeah. So when we talk about service navigation, we help our participants create networks. So it's pretty much just everything you see up here, from the face-to-face interaction to checking in and the home visits, helping them pay rent on time, helping them understand the leases, and one of the things we also do a lot is addressing problems. So when people receive notices, helping them navigate that and making sure they're able to keep their housing, whether it's a 72-hour notice, shut-off notice from PG. Yeah, so we're able to help them navigate that, so next time it happens, they're able to know what to do and how to fix the problem. And we're also going to have an activity here, what it looks like in a day-to-day retention worker's job.
So basically what we're going to ask you guys to do is just take a few minutes. If you check on the screen, you'll see some common things that happen or that come out to our attention as retention workers, either because our participants call us and ask us for these, or these are things that are usually in our agenda. So we are talking about housing first. We are talking about a retention model where we try to keep folks stable, and not only stably housed, but also creating connections and community engagement. Whatever that means, either having some other resources, needs met, and some other things that might be helpful for them. Our days are often chaotic, often full of different things to do. So these are an example of things that we usually have to do on a daily basis. If you are a retention worker, we would like you to take a few minutes to prioritize at least 3 of these things. We're going to give you a few minutes to think about it. You can talk about it in your tables if you want, and then we'll come back here and share our ideas. Sounds good?
Okay, we're gonna regroup, and does anybody want to share what the top 3 or top 4 priorities on y'all's list were as a retention worker? Yeah, does anybody want to share what their top 3 priorities were on this list as a retention worker? Nice.
So we chose to prioritize Naomi and her inspection because rescheduling an inspection can look bad to a landlord. And she may need support if she hasn't done a free inspection before. We would call Anne and see if she actually needed help right then, maybe supporting her through a phone call rather than having to go and do a face-to-face visit. And we had a toss-up between Tyrone and his annual paperwork. We didn't know if Shelter Plus was like an internal joint thing or external. And if it's joint monthly paperwork due, and tell your boss you're sorry, come first. So then if that was the case, we would help Tyrone with his paperwork.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
We would use Uber for all the rest of the month.
Yeah.
Good goal.
I'm here so we can do that.
Anyone?
Any other table?
Sure, we'll share. I guess we did Charles with the social security appointment, the food box, and Pete and
Well, they all are great. This is amazing brainstorming, and it's fascinating. I think the truth is that all of them are important, right? And all of them are priorities for all of our folks. I think when, if you remember the principles Quinn talked about, we're a mobile team, we're participant-centered, we're trauma-informed, and truth to be told, the majority of our retention workers do all of these things in one day. Because we are mobile, because we are able to go and meet our participants where they are, or because we have the freedom to do paperwork with them using our tablets, because we have the opportunity to connect them with food boxes, food banks, our own food pantry, and being able to support them. This is the reason why the model works, and this is why it's sustainable, and that's why our rates are over 80%. So it is a great brainstorming. It's just a good idea to keep you guys in mind about how it looks to be a retention worker, some challenges around it, and how to be true. It's just, they're an amazing team. They do an incredible job, and they're able to tackle the majority, if not all of these things in just one day. That's how it looks for us. Well, oh yeah, well, I think at this point, if anyone has questions or things to add, we're more than happy. We're here to answer. We're both from two retention teams, so we're here for you. Sorry? Okay, no problem. We'll be here around. We also have a couple retention workers as well with us, and we have our names and our tags here if you want to reach out.
Some of our retention workers are back there, Chris and Erika over here.
Yeah, thank you.
How some of those values relate to some of these responsibilities. For instance, are there any of our values that speak to why we want to be at 90s housing inspection?
So that's part of creating and supporting the report. Sometimes these things are really stressful for our folks. When they have dealt with chronic homelessness for years, probably all of their lives, they just move into an apartment, and then after a year, Home Forward says that they want to do an inspection, or the building, whatever tax credit unit they're living in. This is something that really stresses them out. When we are there, when we have connected with landlords, they already know us, and we have enough of a strong relationship with our participants, we're able to be there with them and support them on whatever they can. They can't just engage in these strange conversations with landlords and inspectors about what's going on with them, or so filling paperwork that is sometimes too complex to fill. That's part of the network support.
And similarly, I love the idea of using a bunch of different community resources, but how do our values inform the idea that we actually want to provide Charles and Social Security?
So I can answer that. Like we mentioned earlier, it's really relationship based, and our foundation's set on trust that we build with households. So letting them know that we care and we're there for them. I'd also like to point out that when we say mobile team, we're able to have them in our car. We're able to show them that we care, that we're there with them to navigate any resource until they're good and ready and able to do that on their own. Yeah, sometimes people do, people that are, I've had people on my caseload that maybe riding the bus to the food pantry was really scary, or they didn't even know the route, going with them about 5-6 times until they're ready to do that, and then they're able to connect to their community, go out and let their friends know, their support systems. But pretty much all of our core values go into this. So things as simple as kitty litter that might not seem like it's something that is on a retention worker's list of like job duties. It really is. Everything that's from their day-to-day life matters to us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
So hearing today about the genesis of our outreach program and those core values informs really everything that we do and how we approach the work. There are a lot of things, as retention spoke to, that they do, and it really informs. I spoke to some folks at lunch today, but it really informs how we go out and recruit landlords, how we work with landlords, what the expectations of landlords are from us. And those slides really speak to what the business case is to our landlord recruitment program. It is predicated on and dependent on doing these things post-placement. And I think as a community, we've thought about, we need engagement from local landlords, but what are we offering in return? And how are we inviting them to be part of this process? How are we asking them and inviting them to do good by what they do, which is provide housing? So this is some of the business case that we need to make with landlords, that we're able to address these things, these challenges that new tenants face through an organized program and relationship like Joanne's retention work. And I'd like to add that Quinn's super modest about his work. In fact, Joanne's outreach team has long recruited landlords in relationship, face-to-face, making these connections, pledging to not leave landlords out on their own, and then wrapping in this retention process. So the genesis of our landlord recruitment team really did stem from the work that we were doing, the mobilization of our outreach team, from the grassroots information and feedback we got from homeless people. You need to come to us. You need to bring services to us. We're ready for housing. We need your help in that regard. So that concludes this early portion of the day on our retention program. Take a break here, allow you guys to grab some more snacks and water. Certainly, the retention team that is in the room, can you stand up? It joins retention team overall. They're all here. They're all here to respond to any specific questions you may think are super pertinent to your specific relationships and your specific provision of service and the way you do it. And we will reconvene here at 2:30 for the introduction to our landlord recruitment team. Thank you. we can come back to center here, we will start off with our landlord recruitment portion of the afternoon. So I was having some great conversations. I appreciate those opportunities. It was, like I said, an opportunity to share here today, and I hope we can continue to do that as we move through the work that we do together. So as you take your seats, I see our landlord recruitment team gathered over here on the left. I would like to invite Kaylee up as the coordinator and director of our landlord recruitment process to kick us off this afternoon. There will be a chance for questions. I think there are some cards on your tables, or will be. So we're going to hold our questions until the end of the presentation and come back to those after we've concluded the presentation. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to share at that point in time. So Kaylee?
Hey guys, I'm Kaylee, and I'm the coordinator of the Landlord Recruitment Retention Program at Join. Just to clarify what Will said about the questions, there were papers that y'all got when you got in. If you have questions during the presentation, go ahead and jot those down, and also make sure to get your contact information on those, because anything that we don't have time to address at the end of the presentation, I want to make sure that we get back to you in the next couple of weeks to make sure that everyone's questions were answered. Also wanted to take a second here to thank Will and Sophie and the whole development team at Join for organizing the event today. A big thanks to Quinn, too, for the introduction to outreach, as well as Christina and Angie for the awesome program today on retention. Wanted to also thank Sam Tsemberis for the introduction to Housing First and tying together all the work that we do at Join. And thanks to everyone for attending here today. I'm also nervous, but I don't laugh when I'm nervous. I just get really awkward, so you guys can bear with me on that too. All right, so Join has a dedicated team to work with private market landlords that provide housing opportunities to the folks that we serve, and we also act as a resource for the larger homeless services system for the Portland metro area. We're excited to share this unique program with you and show you how to LERP. All right, so our team consists of Gurney Kimberly, April Ewing, Angie Acree, and then myself, Kaylee. The Landlord Recruitment and Retention Program was created as a response to the state of emergency for the affordable housing and homelessness declared by the City of Portland in 2015. For the first several years of the program, LERP focused on finding private market landlords to provide housing for veterans. In 2018, Join redesigned the program to be a more assistance-focused resource, serving not only our organization, but also the InReach group serving safety off the streets locations, the mobile housing team serving families, and also the veterans group. We'll cover how this team interacts with these teams and what they do later on in the presentation. We have our team broken down into 4 major roles. The coordinator, who's me, acts as the team supervisor, works on grade and systems level projects and community involvement, organizes projects and trainings, and is also the main contact person for our community partners and landlord retention. The master lease worker, who's Gurney, provides the property management for our master lease properties and is also the main response person for our tenants and the point of contact for our landlords and property owners we work with. The data worker, who's April, tracks program outcomes and spreadsheets, provides vacancy information to Join and partner agencies, and helps to assist caseworkers with application processes. The recruitment worker, who's Angie, visits and calls landlords to create new housing opportunities, works with caseworkers to provide housing that we need for the folks that we serve. So today's proto model presentation will follow this flowchart, which is included in the toolkit booklet y'all received today. Be sure to follow along with us. All right, so step 1 is identifying a landlord or property manager for a partnership. This section will cover how to find rentals for the prospective renters that you serve. Here are some methods that our teams found useful in recruiting landlords. First are introductions through a Join worker, board member, or anyone who might have a good relationship with that landlord. Next is cold calling and canvassing. It's helpful to look at Craigslist, Zillow, or any rental listings in your area while paying attention to the area and price range that meets the needs of the population that you serve. Another great way to meet landlords is referrals from landlords that you are currently working with. We found these to be some of our strongest relationships. It can also be helpful to attend networking events in your area that are interest to landlords or host your own events. So what do we look for when we search for rental properties? These are the things that our team keeps in mind. We look for rentals that match the area our renters want to live in, including easy access to public transportation and services the folks that we serve need. We look for lower price rentals, and especially rentals with lower income requirements as part of the application process and the ability to accept voucher payments. We look for rental properties that have flexible screening criteria or the ability to review additional documentation as part of the application process. We also look for rentals that meet the needs of specific populations that we serve, like rentals that can accommodate large families, senior housing, individual SRO rental units, and also properties that are ADA accessible. All right, so today you all got a white folder, which will be the recruitment package that we use, and these are the documents that we actually use when we meet with potential landlords. These are also some following ways that we've recruited landlords. The canvassing and cold calling that we talked about. We make time to take landlords to lunch, stop by with treats, and make time to socialize with them. Make sure to schedule regular check-ins with people. And then when canvassing for landlords, we drop off treat bags, and then we use thank you gifts like the ones that are pictured today. Also, when we're developing relationships with landlords that aren't formally connected to the program, it's helpful to be really responsive to the questions and concerns that they have, and also offer mediation services to our caseworkers as a great way to meet more property managers. So step 2 is building the business case for working with Join while highlighting the benefits and incentives that we offer. So these are the formal benefits that we offer as part of our partnership agreement. The first one is guaranteed rent deposit. Join and our partnering agencies assist with moving costs and many times create plans for ongoing assistance. 2 is proactive support. The LERP team can assist with filling your vacant units quickly. The renters that are referred to you receive the retention services explained earlier or similar services from our partner agencies. We are also able to offer eviction prevention services and renter's insurance if required. The third is neutral mediation. Landlords are able to contact the renter's caseworkers as well as the LERP team, including a 24-hour landlord hotline that we have, as well as a soon-to-be-launched contact app. 4 is tenant education. All residents receive ongoing education on skills to succeed in their tenancy from LERP as well as retention. And 5 is risk mitigation funds that we'll cover later on in this presentation. All right. The way that Join operates with an equity lens also presents a unique benefit to landlords. Join has been committed to actively targeting and addressing equity, inclusion, and racial disparities for our service users, staff, and community since 2013. Our commitment and efforts were strengthened when we identified working towards becoming an anti-racist organization as one of our main objectives in our new strategic plan in 2016. Join recognizes that anti-racism is a process more than a destination. As an organization, we're committed to the long-term work of moving towards anti-racism and reducing disparities. This can create a unique opportunity for landlords since people of color represent a disproportionate percentage of folks experiencing poverty and homelessness. And as such, by working with an organization like Join, it can make a huge difference in tenant experience. Viewing tenancy and all related issues through an equity lens can lead to fewer points of conflict and better relationships with tenants, which extend the longevity of tenancies and enhance asset protection. This point of view strengthens the ability to follow fair housing guidelines as well, and you will have the full support of the LERP team every step of the way. Realizing this important opportunity and obligation, the LERP team added an equity commitment to our formal partnership agreement in 2018. You can view the full text of this commitment in your recruitment packet that you received today. In addition to this commitment, Join knows that the same structural and systemic racism that impacts the people that we serve also impacts landlords of color. As such, the LERP team works to reduce barriers for landlords and tenants of color to access the full supports and opportunities available through our programs. All right, so step 3, we're going to cover the ways that you can work with our program. There are several ways that landlords and property managers can engage with our team. First is using the conventional rental agreement that a landlord or property management company already has established. This information from landlords is used to create a directory of available apartments and rental properties that LIRP shares with joint workers, our clients, and partner agencies. We also offer a formal partnership agreement and the ability to master lease properties. So as stated, Joint can work with your established rental criteria. If you're unable to sign a formal partnership agreement but still want to work with Joint, we have the ability to do that. We share your vacancy information and rental applications, which are presented to a wide group of renters that are excited to succeed in their tenancies. But please note that this arrangement confers none of the explicit benefits of working with LIRP, but we're also here for support. Another way to work with us is entering into our formal partnership agreement. The partnership agreement offers the following commitments from our team and asks from our partner landlords. The LIRP team agrees to 1, respond to the landlord within 2 business days. 2, offer eviction prevention assistance, mediation services, and renter's insurance for up to 1 year. 3, we offer a risk mitigation fund of up to $3,000 per renter for when tenancies don't go as planned. The fund can be used for property damage, court costs, and more. In turn, our partner landlords agree to 1, limit the security deposit they charge to no more than 1 month's rent. 2, work with our team to create a modified screening criteria to help renters gain access to the rental property. 3, provide us copies of necessary paperwork and communicate tenancy concerns promptly. And 4, follow Joint's equity guidelines and all applicable fair housing standards. And another folder you've received today is our partner landlord onboarding folder. I believe that is the red one. There are copies of documents in there that we provide to our new partner landlords. The basic outline of onboarding a new partner landlord includes the following. Step 1, develop a partnership agreement for your organization to use with partner landlords. Be sure to consider both parties' responsibility to the partnership. 2, create a clear list of benefits to the property or landlord for working with your organization. 3, have a clear plan of communication for your new partner. 4, be sure that the rental property conforms to habitability standards. And if you're not sure what those are, your local housing authority is a great source for these. And finish any necessary repairs or coordinate these with the property manager or owner. And then 5, move your new renter into the unit. A unique way to work with our team is to enter into a master lease agreement. Over the last year, we've grown our master lease portfolio. Master leasing is a creative way to house those with the most difficult to overcome barriers. However, taking on these contracts presents many organizational challenges, which is why we want to spend a few extra minutes on this topic. Our current master lease portfolio consists of the following. We have 5 single-family homes comprising 4 3-bedroom homes and 1 2-bedroom home, as well as 3 single-room occupancy units with another 3 pending negotiation in the same building. We also have another 11 on the way and a separate development that's currently under construction. When finished, the new development will include 1 ADA accessible unit. From our experience of master leasing rental properties, we have come to realize this can create great opportunities for folks that we work with, as well as present significant organizational challenges. The following kind of summarizes what we've learned from having our own properties. The pros we've noticed is it definitely creates a unique opportunity for housing those with the most difficult to overcome barriers. It allows access to hard to find rentals, including those for large families and low-cost units for single individuals. It allows a unique opportunity to create intentional community, as you can do with an SRO property, since so much of the living space is shared. It also allows you to provide your own property management with a trauma-informed, strength-based focus. Some of the potential cons to look out for is a large liability. It falls on the organization to follow all applicable fair housing laws for your area. Also, if you're requiring a security deposit, you have to keep that in a separate bank account and figure out how your organization is going to account for extra income coming in, since that's something that we don't typically deal with in this sector. Another thing to watch out for is it can create a large financial obligation that doesn't just include rent, it also includes maintenance, and how you're going to handle maintenance response plan is also how you're going to cover property damage. One of the biggest things to consider too in your agency is what it looks like to enforce notices, including an up to eviction if that becomes necessary. In preparation for onboarding a master lease property, experience has taught us to be prepared. Step one, we negotiate a rental contract with the property owner and landlord. Be sure to cover who's responsible for property management, landscaping if applicable, maintenance, utilities, and appliances. 2, create a clear plan for communication with both the landlord and your residents. 3, create a lease to use with your residents if you're providing property management. 4, obtain renter's insurance for the resident that you're renting to. 5, be sure the property conforms to habitability standards and finish any necessary repairs or coordinate repairs with the property owner or manager. And 6, move your new renter in. So we came up with some secrets to a successful master lease program, which really begin with the preparation of your agency and how you account for the risk present in this situation. Here are some tips to keep you on the right side of landlord-tenant law and keep your rents accounted for. Definitely develop a good relationship with an attorney that specializes in landlord-tenant law, real estate, or contract law. Review the proposed rental contract with the attorney to create a contract that benefits the property as well as your organization. Designate at least one person in your organization to oversee the master lease program to collect rents, provide property management duties and maintenance, depending on your contract, and develop a protocol for your organization of how you want to handle required duties of having master lease properties. Include how to ensure rents are collected, how and what notices and or fees will be issued, what furnishings and appliances are included, who will be covering utility costs and other costs of maintaining the property, how you will choose your renters, and how maintenance requests will be handled. And be sure to be diligent following this protocol while ensuring the successful tenancies with your renters. All right. Step 4 is LERP sharing the vacancies and open units with Join and our service partners. During this portion, we're going to cover other services our team provides in preparation for successful tenancies. So our team shares vacancy information with Join as well as with our partner organizations. This has proven to be a great way to provide housing opportunities for even more folks in our community. The groups that we work with include InReach, which has YWCA, El Programa Hispana, NARA, NAYA, and Urban League, and it's a group dedicated to serving folks in safety off the streets locations like shelters or organized camps. We work with the Mobile Housing Team, or MHT, which comprises Portland Family Homeless Solutions, Latino Network, ERCO, El Programa Hispana, SEI, NARA, and NAYA, which is a group serving homeless families. We also work with the veteran system, including working with the VA and the SSVF voucher program. And these photos here on the slideshow show a few of the families that we have assisted finding housing through the MHT program. Our team is available to assist workers and partner agencies and clients with the following services during the application process. These services help workers to navigate a process that can be confusing and intimidating, helps our clients to feel supported and aware of their rights and obligations as a renter, and allows our landlord partners to know that they're getting a renter that's well educated and excited for their upcoming successful tenancy. We offer pre-screening of our residents through Pacific Screening to address potential background challenges with renters head-on. We offer assistance completing applications. Not only do we keep a large library of rental applications, we also assist with completing and submitting the applications as well as sourcing required documentation. We help workers draft letters of support too if required. We can assist with appeals and reasonable accommodation requests. That's usually a hard to navigate application process for our clients with background challenges. Many of these background challenges happen to stem from many of the realities of homelessness, poverty, and systemic racism, and want to be sure that these are addressed and connect with landlords that are open to addressing these. Number 4 is connection to community resources. If an application is particularly challenging, or in the unfortunate event that we feel a property may not be acting in good faith, We're happy to provide other support contacting community resources such as the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, Oregon Community Alliance of Tenants, and more. We also offer to help the landlords sign up for the LERP partnership if they aren't already connected with our program. In addition, our LERP team provides a variety of trainings for caseworkers that join, as well as partner agencies. These trainings can also be tailored for your tenants, renters of your master lease properties, or for any rental properties. So far, we've offered reasonable accommodation and individualized criminal assessment letter writing, housing search training, how to rent an apartment 101, as well as move-outs and evictions. If you want any further information on these trainings or tips to create these for your agency, definitely connect with a member of our team, and we'd be happy to go over that with you. All right, so the next step is move-in day and what it looks like to work with Join to fill vacant units. So earlier you heard from Quinn from our outreach program, as well as Christina and Angie from retention. This graphic ties together our programs and illustrates the journey our friends experience as they transition to their new permanent housing. So the first step is an outreach worker meets a person who's homeless. The worker develops a relationship with that person. Secondly, the outreach worker develops a housing plan with their new friend, including identifying and overcoming barriers to housing and finding an apartment or rental, sometimes with help from our team. Third, the person moves into their new housing. A warm handoff between outreach and retention introduces the next phase. 4, the retention worker is available for ongoing support to the household, while LERP is available to support the landlord and assist mediating any concerns that may arise. 5, the household and retention worker develop an eco-map, building a network of support away from Join. The new landlord can be an integral aspect of the support network with the backing of LERP. And we also wanted to spend a quick moment today talking about furnishings as part of a consideration for setting up a similar program. It's important to consider how the rental properties you refer residents to will be furnished. Our organization has a relationship with Community Warehouse to help provide furnishings for our friends. The SRO units that we master lease are fully furnished, while the new property under construction, Join will be providing furnishings for. The LERP program also provides washer and dryer sets, lawnmowers, and more to ensure successful tenancies. Be sure to keep good inventory records if you expect these items back. You can also consider giving away items such as microwaves, fans, air conditioners, etc., as welcome gifts to your new renters. And step 5 is a Join friend lives in your rental unit. So here's some ways that we offer landlords to be able to connect with our program. Be aware that communication concerns are one of the main issues we've encountered in working with landlords, so it's important to keep this in consideration. 1, you can connect with your residents' outreach, retention, or worker at a partner agency. This information is shared during the onboarding or at move-in. 2, you can call or email our team, including our 24-hour landlord hotline. 3, we have the risk mitigation funds available that we covered earlier. And 4, we're going to have the new landlord working app called Dwelling Lead, which is coming soon, and they will be explaining that at the conclusion of our presentation. So mediation is a really important part of building and maintaining our relationships. We view landlords, workers, and renters as equally important to our relationship and view mediation through this lens, offering validity and advocacy for all participants to ensure that problems are solved quickly and impartially. The landlord testimonial that you're viewing was a participant in our mediation services, and we all came away from that interaction feeling our relationship was strengthened. Thanks, April. Creating a problem that deals with rental properties also comes along with inherent risks. Here are some of the strategies that Join's developed to protect our organization as well as our partner landlords. 1 is the risk mitigation fund that we went over earlier. Again, this can be accessed for property damage, muck-outs, court costs, anything that a landlord has experienced that ends up costing them money at the end of a difficult rental situation. 2, LERP provides renter's insurance for all of our master lease properties, and we can also provide renter's insurance for up to 1 year where landlords require this coverage. 3, the team's able to pre-screen renters using Pacific screening. We found this to be a really good way to address barriers in a proactive manner. 4, it can be especially beneficial to consider if rentals meet rent reasonableness standards for your local housing authority to assist with long-term rent assistance. This is especially important to consider if you're considering master leasing any properties to ensure that you're always getting income back from the income that you're paying out. 5, a regular inspection schedule can identify potential concerns before they become problems. And 6, having a clear plan to deal with maintenance issues benefits not only the landlord, but also the renter and your organization by dealing with issues in a timely manner. So now the fun part. Successful partnerships lead to more partnerships. And here is some cool stuff that we got done last year. So I'm super excited to share the successes from 2018. That's the very first year our program operated the way that we shared with you today. So 65 people found housing directly from our team's referrals. 128 new properties, landlords or property managers were recruited to work with Join and our partner agencies. 8 landlords or property managers signed formal partnership agreements with our team, and 7 new master lease agreements were signed for 4 single-family homes and 3 single-room occupancy units. We believe our program is unique and extremely valuable in the way the work our organization does and in serving our community. I'm happy to turn the mic over to my teammate, Gurney Kimberly, who's been with me since the first day of redesigning this program. He's going to share with you guys some great stories that demonstrate the value of our unique program.
Thank you, Kaylee, for that very thorough and great presentation. I'm happy to be up here today to share with you guys 4 different stories of success that occurred over the last year. So the first story we titled Grandmother and Grandson. A joint outreach worker asked our team to assist with finding an ADA accessible, affordable apartment for a grandmother and grandson. The family was eligible for a voucher once we identified housing. Initially, the grandmother was approved. However, the grandson was denied due to his criminal background. Our team drafted and submitted a reasonable accommodation letter. However, the property denied our appeal and his application for a second time. Our team had received training on fair housing and determined that the denial was not evaluated properly. After reaching out to the Fair Housing Council of Oregon for further advice, they contacted the property and encouraged them to follow landlord-tenant laws. Shortly thereafter, the grandson's application was approved and the outreach worker moved them in to an affordable, ADA-accessible apartment where they remain comfortably housed today. The second story, titled Grand Lodge. Our team was approached by an organization that owned a single-family home that they wanted to master lease to us. The organization wanted to help a family exiting homelessness. Upon inspection, we determined it was not in compliance with habitability standards. After initial repairs were completed, a re-inspection revealed more repairs were needed. This was a good learning experience for our team in how to negotiate repairs for compliance. This master lease was also our first opportunity to property manage and required that we acquire a property management software for rental forms, rent tracking, and for notices. After a year, the home was in compliance and ready for a family to move in. A family outreach worker told our team about a 9-person family with a baby on the way. The family are immigrants and had limited income. The team knew our new master lease would be a great spot for them to land. On February 4th, 2019, Join signed their first rental agreement with the family for their 3-bedroom home. We're happy to report that the now 10-member family is comfortably housed. The third story, a new home for a newborn. Our team received an email from a healthcare caseworker letting us know about a family facing medical issues while living on the streets for the last year. The woman was pregnant, and the caseworker was concerned about the family living outside during the winter. The worker didn't have any housing resources, but the family was already connected to resources, including a veteran's voucher. We met with the family at Join and looked into housing that matched their voucher. Our initial meeting revealed several barriers, including poor credit, lack of income, and a criminal history. The couple applied for private market rentals, and we drafted letters of explanation as well as reasonable accommodations. Throughout this lengthy and at times discouraging process, the team kept in close contact with the couple, bringing them tents, sleeping bags, food boxes, bus tickets, hygiene stuff, and our friendship as well. The family and our team stayed in contact, and we were all determined to find housing in time for the new baby. In the meantime, we connected them with the mobile housing team for resources, including a long-term hotel stay. The positive attitude and patience that the family had during this process while facing serious health issues, pregnancy, and recovery was truly remarkable. Eventually, the team was presented with an opportunity in the form of a master lease for a 2-bedroom home in the Gateway neighborhood. With the support of the mobile housing team, we were able to get the family approved and moved in. During that process, the team completed a trip to the community warehouse. We picked the family up at the hotel they were calling home and surprised them with their brand new place. The excitement the family felt at finally having a roof over their head and a spot to call home was felt among the members of the team. The huge smiles and tears of joy at seeing a backyard, a bed, and a spot for the new baby were all the thanks we needed and showed us why creating housing opportunities such as this are so needed in the community, and they're a reminder of how important the work our team does as part of Join. The home has already served the couple well, providing a space for a baby shower, a place for one of them to study and complete coursework for his recent enrollment in tech school, and most importantly, a home for the new baby to come and feel safe and loved. Our final story, titled Grizzly Bear. The landlord team worked with the landlord we met through the mobile housing team. We entered a formal partnership agreement with him after hearing his excitement to create housing for those exiting homelessness. He was also willing to not screen applicants. A Join friend we'll call Grizz lived in one of our partners' units already, and after 3 years of tenancy, he experienced an acute mental health crisis, resulting in several lease violations and property damage. The landlord served Grizz a 24-hour notice to evict. Our team intervened and offered a move-out date instead. This saved Grizz an eviction and the landlord the hassle of eviction court. We were able to use the landlord risk mitigation fund to reimburse the damage to the property. The team met with Grizz and his caseworkers and shared a recently acquired SRO master lease housing opportunity. Grizz was excited to move in and make new friends. Happy to report that he's still housed and has become an integral part of this intentional community. So those are the 4 success stories. Thank you, guys.
All right, cool. So as we wrap this up, the only question I've gotten so far is how we fund our risk mitigation fund. We just use our general funding for that, which is also kind of important to consider if you are considering setting up a fund like that. Any type of federal funding could affect people's HUD financing if you're working with any properties that accept HUD financing. So be sure to note in that where that money comes from for any potential landlords that you work with. Also just wanted to throw it out there too, like in addition to what I do at Join, I still am a private market landlord, and I've brought into this 12 markets of 12 years of experience as a landlord. So happy to answer any other questions like that that people might have in setting up a master lease program. In addition, if there's any questions that we didn't get to, feel free to reach out to us. Our email address is there. All of our contact information is in the materials we received, and thanks so much.
Yeah, I will say on the Risk Mitigation Fund, we are fortunate enough to operate and work in a community with some very progressive public funders, and were granted money several years ago to fund the Risk Mitigation Fund, and a process by which it can be replenished inside our contract with the Joint Office of Homeless Services here. So understand not everybody in this room is going to have that opportunity, but it has certainly been a wonderful recruitment tool as we reach out to local landlords. Right now, with the time we have, I'd love to kind of think about this as a collective learning process. We have joint staff that can join you at your tables, and I'd love to prompt some conversation with you folks about what's the biggest challenge that you face. in either your recruitment of landlords, your housing of people, or your housing stabilization. And hopefully between all of us, we can sit down, have a couple good conversations, construction, and learn together about how we can help the people we're set up to serve. I'd like to bring us back together, focus here, wrap up your conversations. And maybe just take a minute if anybody from any of the tables wants to share a highlight of what you spoke about, challenge you faced and got an answer to, or affirmation of success, or the like. I know at our table we talked quite a bit about the equity implications of Join's commitment to being an anti-racist organization. And that's from the landlord's perspective, from the worker's perspective, and from the people that are trying to access services. Does anybody else want to share what they were speaking about at their table? Okay. Oh, yeah. That is another workshop. Sorry, I don't mean to be glib. It's a commitment we made about 18 months ago. It's founded in a specific position that we hired and incorporated at Join as an important aspect of our leadership team. It's about a daily interaction and commitment with set-aside times that we work together on these things. And certainly, if you'd like to have a deeper conversation, I can connect you with Emily Nelson, who's our Director of Equity and Inclusion, to speak about that. But it is definitely a process. We don't even know we're not quite sure how we define the end or the success in that. It's really the commitment, and we want to just get out in front of that and say we're committed to doing this, and it's going to infuse every bit of our process and program. Any other general questions that I can ask? Yes, sir.
No, we were discussing at our table, talking the landlord relationship with the tenant, and I brought up the I guess you have the neutral mediation team, and wanted to know when there was issues that occur, was there a process in place with the landlord and tenant? I also spoke about some of the issues or concerns I had run across about people of color not really seeing or finding landlords who look like them or willing to be able to discuss that. And even those people of color but transgender, all along the board, it doesn't reflect what's out there. And I didn't know, as a mediation team, is there something brought up where we, if necessary, to have to teach the landlord about the people we serve, the community we serve, what this community look like, if they're being a part of that, are they taking the time to understand that, or is that an issue? And so we went and we put our personal opinions in and discussed it, and it was enjoy.
And, yeah, I was there for part of that conversation. Did you guys come up with an answer for that?
Well, they came up with some very unique, but that's the way you expect, because no one is a cookie cutter. No one's made the same. So there was unique answers. And that is something which, the team would probably take to actually go out and speak with landlords.
Yeah, I think on that front, so today we talked a lot about Joy's experience and what we've learned, and first off recognize that even all those things we know and all those things we've learned and all those things we want to practice don't always come out in the right way in every single instance, right? So there's some humility there. And I think as we were speaking at the table, the neutral mediation arises out of the landlord team. It allows our retention team that's doing the housing retention stabilization services to remain an advocate for the person, right? And the landlord team can come in and kind of mitigate that relationship and moderate that relationship, because we're really looking for a three-part relationship: tenant, case manager, landlord, right? So we're all working together. What do we all want? We want long-term stable tenancy. And the issue here is, how do we create the business case with landlords to realize that and work together in each other's self-interest? And so the bit about education with landlords, I think, we were talking about this, and we hope and we envision as next steps for our team, in light of our equity commitments, is to really be a source of a resource for landlords, both who don't understand our population, who want to understand our population better, who we want to find landlords who look like the people we're trying to serve, right? These are all aspects of recruitment that we would like to do a better job of, that we have on our agenda as action plans to really reach out to those communities and see if we can't provide better opportunities for some of the folks that you're talking about. So, thank you. I saw your hand, I couldn't see you behind.
Yeah. So my question is, you briefly mentioned an app. Can we get some information on that?
So actually, we wrap up here. We do have Amplified here to speak about the app, and we'll run about a 10-minute presentation on what the app is. It's not quite ready yet. We've been working on it a long time. Amplified's been a tremendous partner in this regard. Super excited to share it with you. We'll roll right into that in a minute. If there aren't other questions, there are actually answers to those. Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me if I talk without the mic? No. Ah!
So I kind of wonder about the master leasing process itself, because it always sounds really good to go out and reach out to a property manager, get a master lease for all of your clients, but what is like the nuts and bolts and, let's say, cause and effect as far as actually doing that? Because I know my clients, and I know the potential, we'll say, good things and maybe negative things that could happen, and what does that actually look like? Because it always sounds really good, but when you're on the front lines, and
Do you see all these gray hairs?
yeah, I got a few here and here, but I dye mine.
So I've said this I've said, you think I should dye my hair? Anyway,
No.
I've said this in a couple conversations, and I really think that as agencies doing this work in service to the population that we're trying to serve, we have to understand that risk management is a big liability. And if we sit ourselves down on the we have to be safe as possible side, we are not going to do the work that needs to be done, right? So yes, there are liabilities around master lease. As an agency, you have to be able to accept that, and Kaylee warned of that. That has to be something that your DNA, your organizational DNA, allows you to do, right? So the nuts and bolts, I would have you connect with Kaylee on that specifically, but it's a rental agreement that you're negotiating, right? And paying attention to that and what the needs and capacities of your agency are going to differ. And we have a template we've been working through and getting legal review on, and actually we're trying to infuse those with language, a little more social work language rather than property management language, to talk about, and this goes to the gentleman's question here, about the challenges our folks are really facing, and how do we provide the property management in a way that is trauma informed, and that's what Kaylee was speaking to earlier. And so there are aspects of restorative justice involved in how you go about managing that property. And so that's a systems level conversation to change and educate where some landlords are coming from. And not every landlord is going to be suited for that. Their business model isn't going to have the risk mitigation DNA in it. But we've got to be out talking to enough folks and making the business case with enough folks that we can. So if you are interested in master leasing, I would encourage you to talk with Kaylee. The nuts and bolts of it are finding somebody willing and making sure that both your risk management philosophies are going to match, because the expectations are key. If there's not another question. I would like to invite Amplified up to the podium to talk about the app. And I can't tell you how exciting this app is. this was about 18 months ago, I think, maybe even longer. They hosted a little competition about for nonprofits about user design experience, and they brought us into a very well-lit room with white walls and just pretty much asked us, where's the pain? And two of their staff were in there and just kind of walked us through it and said, in the services you do that are reaching so much of the community and the population, where's the real struggle for you? And for us, it was about, or what we settled on after several iterations, it's communication. And it's, as we talk about relationship with landlords, it's communication with landlords. What do we know landlords want most? They want their rent on time, and they want somebody to pick up the phone when they have a problem, right? And at the same time, that's what we're pledging. We're pledging to be with them when they go through to take this risk, right? And yet, our phone tree, maybe some of you guys have been in it, doesn't allow you to talk to a real human being, and everybody's cell phone is full, and they're calling the wrong person because they don't know who actually is in charge of that, or who is engaged in that housing placement transition. So we came up with an app. It is called Dwellingly.ly or something. But anyway, I'm going to butcher your name. Johnny is here to talk about the app. It's not quite ready yet, but super exciting. Stairs are on that side.
Hi everyone, my name is Janani Vasudev, and I'm the design director at a company called Amplify. We're an experienced design, technology, innovation company just a few blocks from here. And like Will said, a couple years ago we began our partnership with Join. The result of that partnership was this mobile app that we designed and are in the process of developing, essentially to improve communication between property managers, landlords, and Join caseworkers. So before I kind of get into the details about the app, I want to show you a quick video that kind of shows you how our partnership started and how this project came to be. All right, so I want to first thank Join and Will for giving us this opportunity and this platform really to share our work. So one of the first things that we heard when we started this partnership was, one of the main reasons people were getting evicted was this lack of a structured communication channel between Join caseworkers and property managers and landlords. In the absence of a communication channel, what happens is minor issues get escalated potentially because there's a struggle that is associated with trying to get in touch with the caseworker, following up, and also there's no feedback loop, so there's a limited transparency or lack of clarity about what's going on with these issues. So what could potentially mitigate evictions is then the presence of a simple and a structured way to communicate between landlords and caseworkers. And that's exactly what Dwellingly does. So Dwellingly is a mobile app that we designed in partnership with Join. It's essentially a purpose-built design tool that facilitates or smoothens the communications gaps that might exist between Join caseworkers and the property managers. So I want to kind of, really quickly walk you guys through some of the main features that this app has, so you get a sense of what you can do with it. So first things first, as a registered caseworker, this app provides, a single place for you to manage all your properties and all your tenants. So if I were a property manager and my name is Tara McKinsey, here's my home screen in the app, and in this spot I can find all my tenants, I can find all my properties, and I also have a quick way to kind of access the Join staff members' contact info from here. I can get more details about a specific tenant. For example, if I wanted to get more information about Megan, I could just click her name, and here I see a way to kind of, all my history with Megan is displayed here. My past tickets. Tickets are essentially issues or complaints that I might register for Megan. There's a problem that you're having, and you want to get in touch with the Join caseworker about this particular issue. This is a quick way to do that. So I can see all my open tickets. Open tickets are tickets that are pending action. I can also see closed tickets. These tickets are resolved, and they'll soon be archived. From here, I can also see all the caseworkers that are assigned to Megan. So up here on the top, I can see the staff members that are working with Megan and I to kind of resolve this issue. I can create a new issue or a compliment because sometimes things may be going well and you want to pay this person a compliment because it goes both ways. So let's talk about, so essentially the main purpose of this app is to kind of, create this one-stop place for you to manage all your properties, all your tenants, and find a way to quickly get in touch with the caseworkers about issues, right? So a core workflow of this app would be then creating new tickets. To create a new ticket, I would click on the name of the person that I want to create this issue for. I would choose a list. I would choose from a list the particular issue that I'm having. And this list, as you saw in the video, we went through an exercise of testing with property managers, and this list came from them. So it's as simple as choosing a particular issue, scrolling down, hitting next, and then maybe I want to say something more than just that was in the list. So I type in a comment or a note, and then verify and submit. So once I submit, you can see that the ticket gets submitted. The joint caseworker immediately gets a notification on their phone, so they know that this issue is pending, and then they can look at it, and then they can take actions on it. And then once I submit a ticket, I can go back to that tenant view and see the status of that particular ticket. In this case, I just submitted a ticket, so I see that it's up there, it's new, there's more information about that particular ticket, the complaint or the problem that I'm having with this person, and any communication that has been exchanged with the joint caseworkers, all kind of maintained in this one spot. And say the joint worker did something about, talk to Megan and helped resolve this issue. What they can do on their side is change the status of a ticket. So what they would do is they would go in, you can see the details about the ticket, you can see the thread of communication you've had with them, and then potentially communicate with the caseworker directly from there. So like I mentioned, this goes both ways. So the property managers and landlords have a view into the application, but on the other side, joint caseworkers also have their own version of this application, which helps them kind of, track all the requests that are coming in from the property managers, kind of, be more streamlined in the way they organize that information. So this is what their screen would look like. So they would sign in with their usernames, passwords, and their home screen. They can basically see an inbox of all the incoming tickets organized by date or by status. For that particular ticket that we just filed for Megan, you see that it's come in here already. And then when they're working on it, they can change the status of the ticket from new to in progress, and once again, the property manager gets a notification that they're working on it. So it's all about kind of keeping everybody in the loop about the issues that are happening. So that's basically it. So this is a super simple app. It does not have bells and whistles. It's a purpose-built tool that is basically just used to streamline communication between the property managers and the caseworkers. This is one of the biggest things that, is a roadblock in all your guys' workflow. Stay engaged and on top of issues, and ultimately provide a one-stop place to manage all your properties and tenants. So if new properties and new tenants get added, Join would add them in their side, so you would get kind of reflected, that will be reflected in your application as well. So by doing this, by streamlining communication, our hope is that we're mitigating evictions and helping people stay in homes. How you can get it, like Will said, this is still in work in progress. But if you wanted to get it, you could talk to your Join caseworker. They should have more information. If there's sign-up sheets available up in front, so we can get you guys on that list. And then online at dwellingly.com to kind of sign up and request for an account. So when you sign up over there and request for an account, Join would get a notification, and then they would approve you into the system. That's it. So pilot program's ongoing, and it's going to be, not ongoing, it's going to start in September. So if you guys want to sign up, the sheets are up in the front, so please do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, super excited, right? That is something that I think as we talk about our process and developing relationship between tenant and landlord and caseworker, the opportunity for lags in communication and miscommunication and non-communication are rampant, and they do lead to problems and trouble with your relationship with landlords and with the tenant's relationship with landlords. So really hopeful that this becomes a new tool for Join to begin with, but for the system in general. I think that it's applicable in a lot of environments. We'll see how it works with Join and how we go forward from there. Certainly, we see huge promise for this. I don't know if you guys have questions about the app or how it works. Yeah. So as Join's not providing medical services or mental health services, and isn't the HIPAA issue isn't the same as it might be for your organization, right? So and obviously, as we report problems here, none of those are actually protected items. So as we house people, we're signing ROIs, and there would definitely need to be an ROI that allows us to talk to the landlord about each person's tenant situation. I don't know how, and there's a question that in further development we can talk about how this might need to be HIPAA compliant given on different partners' usage. So that's definitely an outstanding question.
I have a similar question. We were just chatting and we didn't think this was going to work for DV. Even if we had participants like somehow get signed up on their own, I don't think they could ever do it through us because our ROIs are time limited. And this seems like it's a pretty open, forever kind of platform. But also, how would you work with maybe a participant who was housed with an abusive partner, and it seems like there's a record of every sort of incident, and how would you be able to say like, maybe this was DV or remove things? And I think I would just be concerned about that and just about general.
Yeah, I think DV providers may also have concerns about using this in their populations. As somebody who's experiencing DV that Join is working with, and the danger, I think, so one of the concerns we had was that by developing these tickets, we're creating a list of notices and events that could be used in eviction processes, right? The fact is that landlords already and property managers already have these tools to track those types of things, right? So we're not adding a new tool for them in that regard. I think in terms of DV, it may, and we need to think about this, but in our comments or in our pushback or relationship with landlords, it does allow us to say, you know what you're talking about here isn't a question for the tenant, it's about their DV situation. And so we'd have to talk about how that's expressed, but it does give us a signpost to say, you shouldn't be considering this for eviction if you are. Does that make sense? Mike, dude.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about this because having worked as a landlord in the past for 26 years, sometimes if a person's case managed and you have to change a manager or you change properties, things start going wrong, you start dealing with it, and then finally they're like, wait, is this person case managed? And you go back into their file and then you see, yeah, they were joined. So your case managers have changed. So things change. So having that touch point fairly regularly will actually distinguish
That's our hope, and that's what we heard from the test group of landlords. And there, for people who are interested in this, there is a commitment on the agency side around keeping your staff list up to date, right? So that the program knows who they're supposed to call. I mean, how frustrating would it be for landlord A to try to reach outreach worker B, and that worker's no longer there, and we didn't update right? So there is a data part of this. There's an agency responsibility to make sure we're on top of that. And on the same side, on the landlord's responsibility to update their property managers so that, whether it's done as an agency or as an individual, I think those are some operational things that there's still a little bit of work to do around how we make sure that information isn't confused. But that's exactly what we're hoping for. Anybody else? No, just wave. All right, well, I want to say again, thank you for all of you being here. I know you have important work to do in your own right, sharing that with us. I do want to ask you to take a few minutes. This is, like I said, these are things we've learned over time, and we're not always perfect at doing them either. But there are comment sheets on your table. We would really appreciate you filling that out, either about what you heard or about the presentation. This is something that has been a work for us, and we're all learning on this too. I'll also say that I think the bar opens at 4. The symposium will start at 5 o'clock, so you're all invited to stay and participate in that. Grab a drink. We're going to flip the room a little bit, get up and walk around, grab a join worker and have additional conversations as you like. Most of us will still be hanging out. And want to again thank you for your participation today, and thank you for filling out the comment cards. Thank you. I'd like to start by welcoming you all here tonight to the first ever Join Shares Collective Learning Workshop and Symposium. Really honored to be here, not only tonight, but all day with providers and landlords and funders, community partners around the work that we do, to talk about that, to share learned experience together around that has been super inspiring. Tonight we have 2 keynote speakers to share with you, both with long histories of housing and homeless services. And hopefully at the end we'll have some time to field some of your questions and continue the collaborative nature of the enterprise. Because we are trying to share this space together to really think about how we can come together and face one of a really urgent crisis that our community faces, and that's people experiencing homelessness on the streets of our county. I'd like to start by thanking sponsors for today. Meyer Memorial Trust sponsored our workshop series this afternoon. I'd like to thank them for their support. And this evening tonight, this symposium portion, Care Oregon and Community Development Partners, thank you for your support. As you may have seen, there was a slideshow up a little bit earlier describing some of the successes that Join has experienced in 2018. And just for those of you who don't know a lot about what Join does, we're kind of dedicated to the idea of working with people who are experiencing homelessness, transition to permanent housing, and we do that with about 25 households every week. In 2018, we helped 1,377 people transition off the street into permanent housing, a phenomenal undertaking in itself. And I'd just like to call out and embarrass Join staff who are here and did that amazing work. If you're here, could you stand up and just be recognized briefly? Yeah, that's all of you sitting in the back corner. Yeah, they'll get me back for that later. So as I said earlier today, we spent some time with providers. We talked about our work, the learned experience over 24 years of this work and serving the population that we do. And super excited today to have a moderated discussion about homelessness in this community and in this county. And really excited and thankful for the expression of partnership from our moderator today, Katrina Holland, who is the Executive Director at Community Alliance of Tenants and a longtime housing advocate, who is here tonight to moderate today's interaction. So, Katrina.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so I have to be honest and say that I'm from a black church, so when I say hello, everybody's supposed to go, hello. So, hello, everybody. Hello. There we go. It's actually not what we say, but I'm going to switch a little bit around for this evening. Anyway, thank you to Will for that introduction and for sharing more about Join's work. Again, my name is Katrina Holland. I serve as Executive Director of Community Alliance of Tenants, referred to as CAT. CAT is a tenant membership organization. We've been around for about 23, almost 24 years. And in a nutshell, we try to catch people before they go into homelessness. I guess sort of a moderate diversion kind of thing. And we're primarily a membership-based organization with about 5,000 members across the state in 20 different jurisdictions. And we usually try to focus on folks who are most impacted by the housing crisis. So seniors, low-income folks, people of color, Black and Indigenous folks, as well as folks with disabilities and low-income people. And we've had a partnership with Join for several years now. I always joke, one of these days we're going to get that funded. But typically, you know, we have a program called the Safe Housing Project, and we serve folks on our hotline, where you can call and get sort of advice about what to do if you're having an issue with your landlord. And Join has always been the first folks there to make sure that if people end up having to move or could potentially end up on the streets, placing families into housing to make sure that they do not end up on the streets. So thank you for that. Thank you for your partnership. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really incredibly excited to have the honor and privilege to introduce two amazing people. Tonight we'll be hearing from incredible advocates and experts in this work, and truly experts in this work, Shannon Singleton and Tsemberis. At the conclusion, we'll open it up to you all for questions. This is a community symposium, so tonight is about sharing. You'll hear from us, and then we want to hear from you. So this is a place for us to discuss and learn from each other about ways that we can work together to end homelessness by making housing first a priority in our community. So with that, I'm going to take a few minutes to say some amazing words about our first keynote speaker, Shannon Singleton. So as folks may know, Shannon is Executive Director at Join. She received her undergraduate degree from Temple University, an education steeped in social justice. In Philadelphia, she worked with the Poor People's Economic Human Rights campaign, and Shannon is committed to centering and elevating the voices of people experiencing poverty and homelessness, as well as how to build power through grassroots organizing. Shannon has extensive experience in direct service and earned her Master of Social Work from Portland State University. While, in addition to that, pursuing her degree, she worked as director at Salvation Army Female Emergency Shelter, program manager at Cascadia Behavioral Health Care, and program coordinator at the Portland Housing Bureau. Right now, Shannon serves on the Welcome Home Coalition Steering Committee, Portland Housing Advisory Commission, and she co-chairs the Home for Everyone Coordinating Board and the Metro Bond Oversight Committee. So she's a busy woman, very busy woman. And on top of that, she's an instructor at the Graduate School of Social Work at Portland State University. So please join me in welcoming this amazing woman to the stage.
Whew, that intro made me tired. Well, thank you all so much for coming to our first community symposium, and we really look forward to the conversation tonight. Those who know me, and there's many of you in the room, I can tend to be really brief, and so I am going to be really brief and get to the points of what I want to say so that we can spend more time having dialogue with everyone. In our local community, when we talk about housing first, it shows up in a lot of different ways. Often, our most reasonable way to do it is to pair federal vouchers into a rent subsidy with somebody and provide some wraparound services. Often, what we see is that the federal vouchers don't actually pay for the staffing to do the wraparound services. And so what we do here and have the privilege to do is bring in some local funds to then pay for the service provision that can be out in the community. In addition to that, our system in Multnomah County funds one mobile permanent supportive housing team. And this team in particular is a new concept that is a multi-agency collaborative with a number of culturally specific provider partners, addiction services, mental health services, as well as healthcare navigation. And unfortunately, this team can only serve up to 90 people total. So there are a huge number of folks in our community who may or may not have a rent subsidy, but also don't necessarily have access to the full range of support services. And there's still an over-reliance on an expectation of people being able to access outpatient clinic models and make their way through all of the service systems to get all of the supports that we need. However, most often, retention services are case management type positions. And so these are often not folks who have been trained, nor are they paid to do clinical types of work and provide that mental health support services or addictions. In addition to that, we often in our community are not funding retention services at all. So we have this placement capacity to help move people into housing. We work to take away the barriers that exist around criminal history or income to rent ratios, things that prevent people from being able to move inside. But what we don't often have is any funded positions for people to provide those in-home supports. And this piece is really important. At Join, we believe that homelessness in part is due to a lack of community of support. We don't subscribe to the idea of self-sufficiency. We believe in economic independence and that our job is to help people build a community of support. In order to be able to build that community of support, there needs to be the ability for staff to be out in the community. In most of our providers here, we are stuck with unfunded positions where we are forced to only make phone calls and check in to see if somebody's still in housing. Earlier today, we talked about Join and our mobile model of retention services. Again, this is something that we believe is truly important to really, truly meet people where they're at. The idea of somebody coming into my office to sit down and talk to me about what they need and want is not only not a best practice, but it is not how I like to access the world either. Because there's such a lack of those long-term rent subsidies, most often what you see in Multnomah County is that we are using what is called rapid rehousing to get people inside. So it's a short-term rent assistance for somebody who is low income and paying rents that are sometimes 90%, if not higher, of their income. It is a completely unsustainable model, and we need to do something around rent-regulated, affordable housing. I want to share a little bit of data with you all as well. I tend to really love research, and so if you have not looked at this, I really encourage you to. It's the City of Portland State of Housing Report. And the most recent report from 2018 shows that the average three-person household making $21,990, which is what we talk about as extremely low income, have 0 neighborhoods that they can afford in Portland. People who make $43,980 have 5 affordable neighborhoods. When we break this down in the report and look at the different demographics, there are 0 neighborhoods that are affordable for the Black community. The average income for Black households is $26,675. There are 0 neighborhoods for the Native American community, 0 neighborhoods for the Pacific Islander community, 2 neighborhoods for the Latinx community. For senior households, there are 2 neighborhoods. And for single mothers, the average income is $26,905 and 0 neighborhoods that they can afford. This is not the type of community that I want to live in. We're solving a part of this problem by looking at the recent bond measures and how can we build housing that is affordable for our lowest income neighbors. An important overlay on that is always going to be economic opportunity. We have to address both of these pieces at the same time. I find it absolutely atrocious, as I'm sure many of you do, at the income levels I just shared for communities of color in the city of Portland. The other piece that we need to look at when we think about long-term rent subsidies and permanent supportive housing and federal subsidies is that for communities of color, we often don't qualify. The way that we experience homelessness tends to be couch surfing, doubled up, and things that disqualify us from the federal definitions of what is called chronically homeless. We do have some opportunity to do something different. We've had the privilege to be a part of a pilot project that is with long-term rent assistance vouchers, primarily operating with Northwest Pilot Project, one of our partners who is in the room somewhere here tonight. There you are, right behind the pole. This funding actually allows us to so much more flexibility on how we serve households and who we serve. And we've been able to pair that with the mobile permanent supportive housing team to provide those wraparound services. This is a model that has been unexplored to this point, and part of why I laugh when I call it a pilot is we know for low-income folks that rent subsidies work. We don't need to pilot that. We know that works. So part of what I'd like to share is just really a call to action on how can we get engaged. We need to be looking at how we can expand the long-term rent assistance programs, how we can provide these types of subsidies to communities who may not qualify for the federal subsidies. We need to be looking at how we can fund services revenue. How do we get the ability to provide these retention services outside of City General Fund? There is some recent work happening with the Welcome Home Coalition and a group called Here Together that is exploring what those mechanisms might be and how we can get some dollars in the door to provide the services to really get back to helping people rebuild a community of support and not just move out of homelessness into housing, but move out of survival into thriving. Thank you.
She was walking back to her seat. I was like, you better say that. Say that. And again, say it a little louder for the people in the back. No, it's very true. It's very clear we have a lot of work to do if we're really trying to address this issue of homelessness. And I believe our next speaker, introducing Dr. Sam Tsemberis, is going to have quite a few things to say about that. Sam founded Pathways to Housing in New York City in 1992, based on the belief that housing is a human right. I'm going to say that again. Housing is a human right. So at Pathways, Sam developed the consumer-driven, evidence-based housing first model that provides immediate access to permanent supportive housing to individuals who are homeless and who have mental health and addiction problems. Sam leads Pathways Housing First, which trains direct service organizations, conducts research projects, and influences policy related to Housing First. He's also on the faculty of the Department of Psychiatry at Columbia University Medical Center, and he's currently participating in national studies of homelessness, mental illness, and addiction, and has published numerous articles and book chapters on these topics, including the Housing First Manual. Want to read that. Sam is continuously engaging with communities and agencies considering Pathways model nationally and around the world. So please join me in welcoming Sam to the stage.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi, good evening, everyone. Just learned that from Katrina. I think it's a good thing. It's wonderful to be here on this occasion of the first of the first event of this wonderful organization. And nowhere like Portland to talk about homelessness. I mean, it's really an extraordinary experience just walking around the downtown, and nothing that you can find in these immediate downtown vicinity that allows you to forget it. And so it's even more amazing to have an organization that's so effective. And then the question becomes, how do we bring this to scale? I just want to make some comments about putting some of these things into perspective that we experience locally, and to sort of paint a picture of what's possible. Because I think that the thing is that homelessness has a solution. And so the question is, why do we have homelessness, and how can we end it? And if we can end it, why haven't we? And I would argue that there are things to consider about some of the underlying assumptions of the models we're using, and also of the values that underpin those models. The United States leads the Western world in the number of people that are homeless per capita. If you look up something called the Gini coefficient, G-I-N-I, you'll see a distribution worldwide of income disparity by nation. So the map is colored by light and dark hues, and the darker the hue, the greater the Gini coefficient, which is like a correlation coefficient, goes from 0 to 1. And the United States is somewhere around 0.55. The northern European countries are around low 3 to 5, 3. And then places that are more like Saudi Arabia or Brazil, the disparity is 0.8 or 0.9. Now, why is that related to homelessness? A community psychologist named Paul Toro, along with Beth Shin, did a paper looking at the number of homeless people by country related to income disparity. And it turns out that the countries with the highest income disparity have the most homeless people per capita. So the presence of people on the street is not accidental or not related to these larger economic and policy decisions that drive our income disparity. The United States in the 1970s and 80s was the same as Europe. We have lost federal support for subsidized public housing since that time, and the federal government has never, through both Republican and Democratic administrations, reinvested in the building of public housing. 350,000 units a year pre-1980, down to 50,000 where it remains today. So do we have a housing shortage? Absolutely. Housing has also simultaneously been privatized and is a commodity on the market, huge investment, second or third largest business globally. Some of the TDA and pension fund money that we're members of are investments in real estate companies now. It's not an easy thing to untangle. But what's gotten lost is the disparity and who is left out of the market. Who's left out of the market? Shannon gave you some very clear numbers about the income levels here, and the people that typically Housing First programs work with are even below the 20,000 mark, because they are people who are only on SSI as a benefit. If you're on SSI as a benefit, you have no chance of ever getting back into housing once you're homeless. You'll never be able to put that rent, deposit, security, first months. Not to mention your residential history isn't the kind that landlords are looking for. So we have we have this structural problem, which we can call poverty, but in the context of income disparity, we have a structural problem. It's called billionaires. So it's the other side of the equation. And you can either try and house everybody who's poor, or you can redistribute the billionaires' income so that more people would have housing. It's a choice. When the revolution comes, we have to decide. The thing that happened with homeless services is that because the people that were losing housing quickest were those that were on disability income, we developed a misperception and assumptions that people who are homeless must have addiction problems or mental health problems because they were overrepresented in the visible public population. And what the public saw is what policymakers addressed, and we created a system of care that really predominates even today. I think it would be interesting to look at the number of openings, even in this city, that are assigned to either emergency or transitional housing versus how many are assigned to permanent housing, supportive or otherwise, voucher-led. Because I think where you want to get to in a community is a tipping point where there's more investment and more creation of permanent units than the investment in the endless emergency industrial complex of homeless services with no way out for people. So this 80% success rate that Join happily reports is something to be congratulated. And I just want to point out that how difficult it is to get there and how smart their management is. Listening to their presentation this afternoon about how their program works was like, I didn't know exactly what the analogy was, but I felt like I was meeting my first cousin who I never knew before, you know, because of family circumstances. This part of the family had moved west, and it's like, oh my God. It's like, of course we're related. You know, and it started really from the first slide, because the first slide, you know, about their program was not about housing. You know, and I think this is one of the things that's confusing about Housing First, because it's such a quick and easy label and so intuitive and people get it. But Housing First is actually not about housing. It's about people. And their first slide was relationship. How do we end homelessness? Relationship. It's all about the relationship. Of course, it's also about the housing. But I think Housing First is best thought of as a case management or helping program that also includes housing. Because that housing retention rate of 80% isn't built by meeting someone on the street and bringing them home. As Shannon explained, it's all about the aftercare and follow-up. Because without that, people would be falling out of housing almost as quickly as they were going into housing. People need a lot of support. You're looking at people that are vulnerable. Going into housing is a huge transition, and that support is what creates A, the stability, and A, the relocation opportunities when people lose that first apartment or their second apartment and need to move to somewhere else. The stability is not because people go into a place and stay there. It's because people join a program and the program joins them, and they go through things together, whether it's eviction, relocation, hospitalization, and back home. It's what creates the stability is the continuity of care in that relationship. So it's all about relationship with housing. And of course, the sequence is important. And the other part that's very, very important in this is this thing about empowerment. We don't want to be in a social service system or industry that makes us endlessly needed by the people we serve. You know, the reason that these programs work so well is because of the empowerment of choice. People have a choice about what they want. We ended up discovering that Housing First was a good idea Not because I certainly didn't think of it. I thought hospital was a good idea for a long time for people with mental illness, and I would bring them there, I mean, involuntarily if necessary. And then they were back on the street a month later, and over again. And I'm a slow learner. It took a while to figure out that we're going to do something different here, which is we're not going to assume we know what's good for people. Why don't we try this radical idea of asking them what they think? And they were there waiting all along to be asked. No one had asked them before. Isn't that obvious? A place to live. What could be simpler? But we couldn't get anyone into a place to live because all of the permanent supportive housing programs required weeks and months of sobriety, participation in treatment. So we had to create another model, which is allowing people the dignity of their choice, the dignity of their failures, so that they can experience success in housing and getting their lives together. That's a very different approach, that empowerment approach, where people decide from the beginning what's good for them, as opposed to an approach that requires people to be endlessly compliant and learning to follow the rules just to graduate into independence. The other thing about empowerment is that it's not only about choice, it's also about addressing poverty. People don't have many choices when they have no money. So the rent subsidy and the additional supports around income and emergency care are essential to the success of the program. The attitude about helping people financially is not a charity, it's a form of justice. It's a form of increasing their options. And the third part of empowerment is including people who are receiving the services, participating in the program, to be at the decision-making table of the program itself. People with lived experience need to be at every part of the agency. I want to give you one example of a place where homelessness was ended. After years, it was a 10-year plan, but I want to leave you with this because I want all of us to know that this is totally possible. So, and many of you, I imagine, already know this, so forgive me if I'm repeating things that you know, but it really comes from Finland. How many people know that Finland has ended homelessness? Oh, okay, well, so it might be news to a few of you. So what happened was they decided in Finland nationally, which they're not the only country that's done that. Lots of countries in Europe have done this, Canada. We at HUD call housing first as a national strategy, but we've watered it down to a housing first approach. The Finns took housing first seriously and thought, wait a minute, if you can take people off the street and put them into housing with supports afterward, as opposed to getting them sober and in treatment and then into housing, well, the Finns are practical. I mean, if we thought about it that way, think about it for just a moment. How many of us would actually be able to stay in housing if we had to be clean and sober for 6 or 12 months? It would be a lot worse in Portland. Never mind sane. You have to be sane and sober. So it's a high lift for anybody, and we're not giving people. We're not enabling. All we're doing is leveling the playing field so people who are poor have the same rights and options as the rest of us. But the Finns began to invest in building permanent housing. They started with the low-hanging fruit of taking their shelter system. They had a huge shelter system because they couldn't afford to leave people on the streets in the winter, and converting the shelters into studio apartments. They created a foundation called the Y Foundation, the letter Y, that was endowed by government, business community, and faith community. And they began to purchase, rehabilitate, or otherwise acquire anything that was on the market for housing. In 10 years, they purchased 12,000 units of housing. They only had 2,500 homeless people at the peak back in 2008. This is now 2018 where this study came out. So what do they do with the rest of it? Well, they operate this vast real estate agency under the Y Foundation, a nonprofit, and they have people who are homeless in the units, but the other units are rented out at market value or some subsidy value. There's a kind of a sliding scale of how much you make and how much you pay. Altogether, that 12,000 unit real estate portfolio is financially sustainable. They don't need additional funds because the money from the rental goes back into the entire business to keep the housing up to date and safe and secure. So Finland started with about 2,200 homeless people in 2008. Now they have 0. They had 600 shelter beds in 2008. Now they have 52 shelter beds in Helsinki, and no one is homeless for more than 10 days. Now, none of this, what I'm describing to you, is particularly like some new invention. It's just practical, sensible ways of addressing a problem. But what's underneath it is a value system that we need to figure out how to make a larger part of our own community. And that value system includes a sense of social inclusion, that we want a community, we want a city, we want a country where everyone lives with each other as opposed to more of a segregated settings. Housing as a basic human right, because people need it and they don't have to earn it. And a good model for doing all of this, which is what's happening here at Join, Housing First, and happening in other places. So it is possible, we can do it, but we have some work to do to change our attitude about it to get there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sam, for those of us that are sane and sober and could hear. Thank you for those words. The solution to homelessness is housing. That's something you say often, isn't it, Shannon? Yes, the solution to homelessness is housing. So we're at the point now where we're going to open it up to have you all take the lead. There's a note here that says I'd like to invite Shannon and Sam back up to the stage. They're here. Welcome back. So how this works tonight is that we will open with a few questions that we have prepared. And for you in the audience, please write down on the piece of paper at your table. There's a little half sheet that has the Join logo on it and some instructions, and then you have some blue pens on your table. Write down on the piece of paper some questions that you'd like to ask, and there are volunteers, and I don't know how Join staff would feel about being called volunteers, but there are Joint staff and volunteers, I'm just kidding, around the room that will collect your questions, so people raise them up, and then we'll collect them and go from there. So please know that we may not get to every question tonight, but we will definitely do our best. All right, so I think I'm going to turn this one off, otherwise we're going to have feedback. Oh, got it, okay, all right. Did it switch? It did, it worked. Lovely, okay. Do you have yours on now? Can they hear you? Check 1, check 2.
Yes.
Perfect. Same for you, Sam. Hope so. Yeah. I turned that one off, so hopefully. Okay. Awesome, lovely. All right. Oh no, it's too much. Okay, all right, that'll work. So, for each of you, what existed before Housing First? What existed before Housing First?
So before Housing First, this is actually when I first started doing social work and working in a homeless shelter, and it was very much You have to come into shelter, be clean and sober, stay clean and sober, and then show that you're ready for the next step, which could often be transitional housing or employment, now referred to much more often as the STEP system, where you have these kind of layers that you keep proving that you're ready for the next level of housing. It was something that was often referred to as housing readiness, and how people could show that they were ready to be inside permanent housing. So I actually was practicing in the field when we shifted and housing first became a thing, and it was, surprisingly, I'm a little embarrassed, like, whoa! That makes so much sense. And I worked at a clean and sober shelter, and I will share that I lost that job pretty quickly when I was told I had to tell a 75-year-old African-American man that he needed to leave shelter and go back to the streets because a pipe was found in his belongings when they did bed checks. And it was just seemed so wrong to me that I couldn't do it, and decided to go be a bartender for a little while because I lost that job.
That's what working in a sobriety shelter will do for you.
End up pushing you to the bar.
Can I just maybe make a comment about before?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to go all the way back to before there was homelessness. You know, because I think that one of the challenges we have is that it's been around so long that we think about it like these big problems like climate change, or like, you know, it's taken on. How are we actually ever going to address this? But I think that for people that were around and walking the streets and seeing the increasing number of homeless people in the early 80s, there was a shock to it. It was not really easy to walk past somebody. It was startling. And I don't know, for those of you that have kids, if you walk by a homeless person with a young child, they still have that, like, we just walked by someone. Did you see that person? It's not normal to be able to walk by another human being like that. And yet, because it's been around so much, you know, we have a whole generation of people now that have grown up and have trained themselves in a way to shut down. We all have. Otherwise, it would be not allowable, not something we could tolerate. You know, I was talking to Charlie a little earlier when he described being in his apartment and looking down at someone in the parking lot and being unnerved by it. That's what we have to get to in order to have the kind of public outcry that could end this, to go back to what it was before we had all these programs.
I'm going to go off script for a second. Don't hate me. Just kidding. What do you think created that shift? Because I can think back to my community development days, and we were taught sort of the history of housing in America. At one point, settlement was sort of the 40 acres and well, not necessarily 40 acres and a mule, but a piece of land, some materials to build a house, et cetera, was sort of guaranteed to you when you came to settle. You were guaranteed a place to live. What shifted and when? Yeah. What shifted and when in terms of this sort of thought that housing is a human right? If you live in America, you have a place to live. You're going to no matter what. Because those things were provided by the government.
Right. Well, I guess for me, I guess what shifted for me was really, you know, I was trained as a clinical psychologist in New York, so I was working at Bellevue. It was kind of, there's a kind of a medical model approach where you are the expert. And so all of the work around homelessness was actually working on what they called an emergency room on the streets. We would drive around the city and conduct assessments of people who were mentally ill and possibly a danger to themselves or others. It was an emergency room. And we were doing that over and over again, and as I said, it was like there was a repetition that this is not working. And we collaborated with somebody named at Boston University, Bill Anthony, Mikhail Cohen. We're talking about a psychiatric rehabilitation approach, which is an approach to helping people both in terms of it's like physical rehabilitation, except it's for psychiatric issues. And you take the approach that the person is the expert of their own experience and their own capabilities rather than assuming that you know better than they do. That was a huge shift because you're looking at your bookcase of all these courses and all these books you've taken. And it's like, I can't use that anymore. You know, it's like you're starting over with the humility of having somebody who doesn't look that well. They're going to get into the driver's seat of the car and tell you where to go. So there's a certain anxiety to that shift. But that was the shift. The shift was turning over the decision-making to the client.
So the kind of the shift of the federal government really being a part of the solution and looking at housing as a human right. I'm going to say Reaganomics and the federal disinvestment in publicly funded housing across the board is when we saw this change in homelessness and this spike in street homelessness. And I think Sam spoke a little bit about the number of units we were building at one time, pre-'80s and post-'80s, and how the number of units we were building, or apartments we were building for people, decreased so significantly that there are literally not enough places for people to go. And again, I don't want to lose sight of the economic component of that. This idea that the lowest income folks continued to lose ground over time meant that more and more people continued to fall into homelessness who maybe before were able to maintain some sort of subsistence living and maybe rely on some family or other supports, but not necessarily need being on the streets or in a shelter.
Thank you. Ooh, that's a controversial one. But it sounds like there's a bunch of questions. Okay, we're going to go off script. Yay, Emily! All right. Beautiful, Emily. Thank you for bringing the questions. Okay, what are the barriers in this county or country? Well, it says country? Okay. What are the barriers in this country, in Portland, to implementing the benchmark program from Finland? Certainly the ROI is greater than the dollar investment? Question mark, question mark.
I think that the return on investment has been demonstrated to be, excellent. Not for the entire homeless population, but certainly to make it worthy of an investment. I think what gets in the way is the values piece. I don't think we as a country, look where we're living today. You know, we're more separated than ever. I was yesterday having a conversation with a young man about this issue. I was explaining Housing First, and he was saying, well, is there another way? Is there another way? Because people seem to be on the street and with addiction, and they seem to have lost their spiritual way, and they need spiritual counseling. And it's like that did something to my stereotype of young people. But I didn't really know what to say, except, we've actually tried that a lot, and it doesn't work that way. So I think that one of the things that we can do, and I think, like this organization, at the organizational level, you can operate like you are Finland, but it's harder as you go, let's say, maybe even at the municipal level. But the minute you get more and more inclusive, it becomes more and more challenging. The ways I've seen it change fundamentally, like in Canada, they had a 5-year study. The government was not the cool new Justin Trudeau government. It was the old Harper conservative government. And they looked at the return on investment of this study across 5 cities, and they were saving more than the money they had invested in doing the study and the intervention. And the Harper government made a federal policy and funding decision to say that if you are receiving federal money in Canada, you have to spend 50 cents of every dollar on a Housing First program. So top down, bottom up, many ways to get there, but it does take a movement.
Yeah. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's the values. We're very much rooted in Protestant work ethic and this idea of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, which I always like to share is actually funny because it's literally impossible and used to mean the opposite of what we've made it mean now. But yes, very much about the values and who we think deserves. I don't think want to have the conversation that we're still rooted in the deserving and the undeserving poor. And that's something we need to tackle and be willing to shift.
Okay, housing first is now something of a buzzword. How do we thank you. How do we keep the fidelity? Sorry. They're not gonna hire me again for this. Just kidding. Let me be clear, I was not hired. This hole is getting deeper. How do we keep the fidelity to this model when agencies/services are saying, I do housing first, but do it in a way that is oppressive/racist or out of step with a human rights approach?
I think that we can, I mean, there's accountability component of this to me where we can, if you're really doing housing first and you're rooted in the values of it, these things can't show up. And when they do show up, there needs to be that accountability. Why do we continue to fund programs who do things like that, where there is that experience? We tend to have systems set up in a way that we're just kind of perpetuating what already existed without a lot of we're not asking the questions about what people are really doing. We're not asking the folks who are coming through our services on how they're experiencing our services. I think it's important to remember that all of us, everyone in this country was raised in white supremacist culture. It's just real. Somebody once told me we all drink from the same poison well, and we all have to unlearn it if it's something that we want to change. If we're not willing to admit that as a first step, we're never going to get there on racial equity. But we also need our funding partners to hold people accountable to say, you can write a really nice racial equity plan, but I want to know how folks of color are experiencing your services. And if we actually hear from them, we have the ability to make change. I think there was more to that question, I'm sorry. And I do think this is where I get a little, as my staff knows, because I say this to them all the time, I get really nerdy about housing first. I think that there is a fidelity scale that's just real. And not every agency is going to be able to be funded or operate in a way that meets true fidelity. And there is the ability to do it and rely on those values that it isn't showing up as racism, but you may not have the full rent subsidy, or it may not be folks who just have disability income. It's folks who have zero income sometimes, and so it will look a little bit different. I think that's okay. It's about staying rooted in those values of personal choice, of how do we lift people up, how do we let them, as you said, drive the car.
A good one. This is a really good one. What is the cost per year per person, if it's known, of homelessness in PDX? A lot.
It is. Gosh, I wish I had that data point in my mind, and I don't. Huh? Where's Anna? Anna, do you know how much it costs? I think I will say I don't know the actual number. I know that we have some studies locally that include what the hospital system, law enforcement system, particularly a study done with Bud Clark Commons, the apartments, and how that housing plus services decreased the amount of emergency room visits and the dollar amount then that was connected to that. I know there's national studies around the cost savings, but I will say that when we put up the materials, we'll put up some of the links to some of the local studies as well.
Most of the cost studies are very, very positive, but they're also pre-selecting people who are frequent users of acute care systems. And so you always get that kind of almost like a waterfall effect on the drop on expenses. But if you take in the entire group of people who are experiencing homelessness, that levels off. There are some people hiding away from services so that their engagement in a program actually is an increase. I think that it's a risk to tie housing first implementation to a cost saving. It should come more from a rights perspective, housing as a right, no matter what it costs, rather than prove to me that this is going to save us money to take people off the street. How come we don't have to prove, the Pentagon budget?
Just saying.
I would also add one thing that I think doesn't get talked about is the cost to the people. The amount of trauma that folks experience outside is something that we should be unwilling to allow them to pay.
Right, absolutely.
You're talking about the cost of the pain that people are experiencing. And I think, I just want to add to that there's a cost that we're all paying. That it's costing us part of our humanity to be able to walk past people. And that's another cost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two questions here, and I think I'm going to just go ahead and ask the second one. Why don't we move people into existing public housing? I hear this question all the time. There's a lot of subsidized housing. Why don't we move people into existing public housing? Mm-hmm.
We would if we could.
My question back is what public housing? We know in Multnomah County we have an enormous wait list for housing. It's always a lottery system when we do have vouchers come up. The last time we had, I think it's 1 in 4 people who need affordable housing actually get access to a voucher. So there's just literally not enough. And those are primarily through voucher forms, which it's not the same as public housing. But yeah, we just don't have enough. And we definitely would if we could.
What causes homelessness?
Lack of affordable housing.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
As Barbara Ehrenreich says, it's not lack of character, it's lack of cash.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Is there a larger role for the private sector to address homelessness?
Yeah, I think that, at Join, we do a lot of partnership with private market landlords, for example. Some of what we try to do is help decrease the barriers so that we can get people moved in, provide some supports, not only the support services for the tenant, but also for the landlords. If issues are arising, there's, mediation is an amazing thing. There's a lot of issues when you have an honest, open conversation about that you can actually move through and keep people inside. And I also think in the business community, there is the ability to engage more around not only giving dollars, but how can you show up? When I go to some different groups, people will say, well, I want to volunteer. What can that look like? And I often pose back a question of, what are you passionate about? Folks who sleep outside are also passionate about things that don't have anything to do with their challenges or lack of housing. So if it's you coming in to teach people how to knit, or to even provide the supplies so that people can do something that is, I don't deal with like my negative stuff all the time. Folks who are stuck sleeping outside shouldn't have to do that either. So I think there's a lot of ways that people can engage that isn't, again, just about giving money or just showing up to hand out food. Bring you and bring the things that you're passionate about and have a conversation with people. I think the piece around walking by folks is really huge. And sometimes we lose even these small ways that we can engage, that acknowledging somebody as a human being that exists in this world with you is really powerful. Even just looking at somebody and smiling at them can be really impactful. We lose that a lot in our community and we don't necessarily talk about it. And I do want to share one more quick anecdote where one day I was walking up to class at Portland State, and this woman was crying, and I looked over and I had recognized her from the shelter I was working at. And when I asked her what was wrong, she said, somebody just tried to pull me into the car, and I was screaming, and the bus stop was full of people, and nobody even looked at me. And I made the mistake, honestly, of saying, I can't believe nobody did anything. And she looked at me and said, Shannon, don't you understand that nobody even sees me? People, we just need to see people sometimes, and that's a way that we can be a part of a solution.
Was the question about the business community?
Private.
Private, yeah. Well, what I thought maybe also as a possibility is that there's a huge need for economic recovery. And so the potential of creating a few positions for people or helping them with their employment, next step, because housing first everybody gets, but then what's second? You know, and it's usually people needing something like work to do. And so I think there could be a great collaboration there.
Portland has a housing shortage, and we're working on increasing supply. How can we serve and support people without housing in the interim?
So I think there's a couple of different models that we should be willing to have in our communities. We have a number of facility-based shelters. We also have a number of different villages or temporary or transitional campgrounds that are actually highly effective at creating safety for folks while they're stuck on the streets. One of the things we did more recently in the community was actually connect those types of sites with services to move out and into housing. A data point that I'm super proud of in our community is at one of these sites, the length of stay for people went from 10 years to 3 years by simply coming to them and offering supports to help them move out. So this idea that encampments or these transitional communities aren't effective is just wrong. And as much as I would love us to be able to build it quicker so that we can actually get folks into apartments, we do have this interim phase. But we need to have options that speak to everybody and that are accessible to everybody. I don't know if anybody in this room has spent a lot of time in a mass shelter, but when I was facing homelessness, made the choice to couch surf and sleep in my car instead of sleep in a mass shelter. And so I think it's important to know that that model doesn't work for everybody, and we need to have a lot of options out there.
How many people are experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County?
Wish I knew.
It's right there.
I'm looking at you, joint office. Do we have new point in time count numbers, or are we still on 2017?
Oh, okay. 2017 recorded 4,177 people in Multnomah County. And those are visibly homeless folks, right? That isn't necessarily people who are couch surfing or moving from place to place. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, this is kind of a sticky one, but it is asked a lot. Are people coming to Portland just to access homeless services? I'm sorry, I can see your face getting red. Y'all wrote it down. I didn't write it. I'm just kidding. No, I get it.
So no, this is something that's a myth that is in communities throughout the country. When I was working at the Housing Bureau, we actually had a whole set of slides that was headlines from across the US of every single different jurisdiction having that same headline. Homeless people are moving here for services. People move here for a lot of different reasons. Often we actually ask the question when we do our surveys to do the point in time count. And often it's for the same things that anybody else moves here for: family, friends, employment. I meet a number of folks who have moved with the promise of a job and not actually having that once they got here. So I think that, I'm somebody who moved here and didn't have a job and was lucky enough to be able to secure one before things got worse for me. But the idea that people move here for these absolute basic subsistence level of services, again, if you've never been in a shelter, go to one and you will help debunk that myth that people come here for something like that in your everyday life. Yep.
There's a kind of a general public denial of things that are not comfortable, racism, poverty, I remember the early papers about homelessness. Leona Bachrach was one of them. Like, where are all these homeless people coming from? As if they were imported somehow. Like, there was an inability to acknowledge that America and poverty was not quite something that people were comfortable with, and still goes on today.
Right.
You know, the debate about where are these people from? Oh, they're actually ours.
Right. Yeah, they're actually
It's
American.
just us, but poor.
Yeah. Yep. It's real. So working at a tenants' rights organization, we definitely take the perspective that the private sector has an absolute responsibility to try to contribute to resolving the problem that sometimes they contribute to, especially with things like no-cause evictions, lack of rent regulation, et cetera, that push people out into the margins. Obviously, that's a difficult space to be in. It's a difficult question to ask and a difficult question to answer. But what are sort of the market dynamics that we can address in a meaningful way to help slow down this consistent infusion of homeless people from the private market?
I don't think we're doing anything to actually address the rate at which we're producing poverty and homelessness is greater than the systems we have in place to get people out of homelessness. I mean, just recently they were announcing the count for this year in Los Angeles County and city. And it was up again, like I think 12% in the county, 16% in the city. And the headline in the LA Times said, homelessness count shows 16% increase in the county and 12 in the city, semicolon, officials stunned. Like, I didn't know what to be more upset about, that the count is up again, or that, how could they be stunned? It's going, every year, 9 out of the last 10 years, it's going up. And there's almost like, oh, we need more emergency programs, Eric Garcetti says. Bridge housing in every service area. The continued investment in a problem that requires permanent housing and putting money and effort into more emergency services isn't getting us anywhere. And these battles about affordability of rent, having the housing market still as a commodity going up, although there was this modest effort by the governor here to kind of put a bit of a cap on it, but we need structural changes to change that.
All right, we just got another question from the audience. Even with a subsidy, our clients still need a source of income. What are examples of income or pathways to this income that you have seen succeed?
I have to wait for the green light. So often we are, a lot of folks are forced to try and make it on a Social Security disability income, which is still extremely low. One of the things that I am excited about is some opportunities where we're looking at how can we do maybe increased support around childcare and really help people get into apprenticeships or paid internships that lead to job placement. I think that we're stuck in this space of folks taking the first job that they possibly can because they're being placed even with a long-term subsidy in a space that they're expected to take over some portion of their rent at some point. So people are taking extremely low-wage jobs. The minimum wage jobs here are actually full-time minimum wage worker is still at that extremely low income level. So I would like to see us really move into the space of how can people get into housing wage jobs? How can we support people to move out of poverty and actually be able to support their family long term? It may take a little bit longer. It may mean that we need to look at how long we can do different kinds of subsidies. But again, the folks who sleep outside are just as passionate and skilled and committed to their families and their well-being as folks who live inside. They just don't have the same type of opportunity. So that is a gap I think we have in our community, is actual access to housing wage jobs.
Most of the people that are served by our programs are on SSI, which is, you know, $600-700, maybe $800, depending on what state it is. And after they're paying 30% of their income towards the rent, yeah, they are on such a narrow margin of error to be able to pay the utility and groceries. One thing goes wrong, and you know they have to decide skip the groceries or forget buying shoes, or can't see my family and can't pay the rent, always juggling between impossible hardship. So, there's a modest gain to ending homelessness, but that's only the beginning of addressing issues that at least you have a shot now at being able to think about these things or think about a way forward. But it certainly doesn't solve everything.
I do want to add one more thing that we've seen, or maybe we're paying attention to, so we see it more frequently. But the number of folks who are in minimum wage jobs and don't have access to paid time off, don't have sick time, can't do things around childcare that they may need. We're seeing people come back for additional rent assistance needs because they faced a medical emergency. And because of that medical emergency and taking time off of work and missing income during that time, they're faced with homelessness again. And so there's also some of the protections around workers and what I think we should believe that people should have access to. People need paid time off. Things are going to happen, and that shouldn't be the result of having to take time off for your own or your child's sickness, should not result in your homelessness.
I'm gonna just let that rest for a second. So good. Would you address the value of businesses advocating for good policies that prevent homelessness? For example, tenant protections. I swear I didn't write that. I've been up here the entire time.
Can you say it? I'm sorry.
Sure. Would you address the value of businesses advocating for good policies that prevent homelessness? For example, tenant protections. See, it's right there. I didn't write it.
I mean, I feel like that's a you question.
I know.
Like, why don't you answer that?
Because I'm not answering questions today. I'm kidding. I'm happy to answer if you'd like. Extreme value. Let's just say that. Extreme value. Little plug, stable homes for Oregon families. We had business members participate. Thank you, business members who participated. Okay. Commercial's done.
I'm like, our goal in that is to support you.
Right. Right. How much time do we have left? 4 minutes? Is that what I'm seeing? Okay. Okay. All right. I've been holding off asking this question because I know it's really controversial. Do people abuse the system? It was written here. I swear I did not come up with that. I'm just kidding.
How do they abuse the system? What do you mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't say it.
No,
just
do
says,
people abuse this? Take advantage?
Yeah.
You know, it's
any way you want to. Have fun.
What's that?
Any way you want to answer. Have fun.
Well, you know what comes to mind? I mean, I think this is a huge issue, especially among fiscally conservative administrations. They hire the best economists to consider exactly the economic hazard ratios of providing services and support in such a way that they won't make it too easy for people to take advantage of the system. So here's an example of what happened in the New York City shelter system under Mayor Bloomberg, who was terrific on the environment, great on getting sugar out of people's diets, but horrible on homelessness. There were more homeless people after his administration than before. Because he was so smart economically, he wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of the system. So there were 50,000 homeless families in the New York City shelter system when he started out, and they figured out this program to incentivize poor people, because I think fundamentally they thought poor people just need to work harder. That's their problem. So the program, and when I say for homeless families, it was single-parent moms, about 95% with 2 kids, like 35 years old mom and 7 to 12-year-old kids, kind of like that. Why were the moms in the shelter? When you look at the data, the most frequently given answer was because their kid got sick. So no health insurance, take off work, just one, not shelter. So Bloomberg offers this program called, he called it something plus, like Assistance Plus, the name will come to, Rent Advantage. So the Rent Advantage was, Rent Advantage. So they probably had a branding person on the job, Rent Advantage gave the family 80% of the rent to find an apartment. They would have to contribute 20% in the first year. But you don't want them getting lazy. You know how these poor people are. So in the second year, it dropped to 60% of the rent. In the third year, 40, 20, and then in 5 years, that was the grand plan they would have gotten out of all of their, lack of training for jobs, out of poverty, out of everything else, and they would be just like Mike. So in the first year, almost 80% of the families left the shelter system. And then in the second year, when the rent dropped from 80 to 60, people began to trickle back. And by the third year, when it dropped to 40, all of the families had returned to shelter. Just to protect people taking advantage of the system. There may be some people that take advantage of the system, but mostly the people we're dealing with have been taken advantage of.
So the way that I would answer that is, yes, I think that white men have taken advantage of the system for a really long time.
Paying 0 taxes on $11.2 billion profits. Thanks, Amazon. Assuming, this is the last question, because I believe we're almost out of time. Assuming that homelessness is solvable, what is one thing that we can/must do tonight or tomorrow morning to contribute to the solution? I know to hit me.
I would say that if we all thought, whenever we're in a conversation about homelessness services of any kind, if there isn't a concept of ending it with housing attached, it's not a program worth saving.
Come on, green light. Okay. Shannon said I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Well, thank you all for being here tonight at Join Shares. If you'd, yes, give yourselves a hand. Give them a hand. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please join us on the terrace. Take the elevator to the 3rd floors. Volunteers will be directing, and we can keep the conversation going because I'm pretty sure we have tons of things to say after this amazing conversation. Again, thank you for attending Join Shares. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our amazing speakers. I hope you'll continue to stay engaged.